Alyssa stepped out of the taxi with a single suitcase and a heart full of silent hope. The small town looked quiet, wrapped in mist like an old secret. Her new home stood at the end of the lane, a tall Victorian house with peeling white paint, crooked windows, and ivy crawling up the porch like it had something to say. She had come alone, far away from the noise of her old life. There was no one left to chase her here. Ethan was gone. 3 years had passed since he disappeared without a word, without a body, without closure. Friends called it a mystery. She called it abandonment. Whatever it was, it had broken something inside her. Now she was here. The house was old, but something about it felt safe. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way no one in town asked too many questions. The agent had warned her about creaky floors and cold nights. She hadn't warned her about the mirror in the upstairs bedroom. It stood opposite the bed, tall and heavy, framed in dark wood with vines carved into the sides. The glass was clear, but the surface felt strange, like it was too clean for a house so old. Alyssa had planned to cover it, but each night she found herself staring into it longer than she meant to. First week passed quietly. She explored the town during the day, sipping coffee from the tiny cafe by the river and walking through antique shops where old women whispered stories. They spoke about the house sometimes, how it had changed owners too often, how one girl never left. Alyssa listened but didn't ask questions. She had her own ghosts. That night, she read books in bed, always glancing at the mirror before turning off the lamp. It was a habit now, like checking a locked door. Most nights, the reflection matched her exactly. But one night, something was wrong. She sat on the bed brushing her hair. The mirror showed the same until she blinked. And her reflection didn't. She froze, staring hard, breath shallow. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe she blinked too fast to notice. She blinked again. This time, the reflection followed. She let out a breath and shook her head, laughing nervously. She was tired. Her mind was still healing. It was just stress. But something deep inside her, something old and quiet, began to stir. The next night, she turned the mirror to the wall. She told herself she wasn't afraid. She just didn't need distractions. But in the middle of the night, she woke up cold and sweating, and the mirror was facing her again. She stared at it in the dark, heart pounding. She hadn't moved it. She was sure. She hadn't touched it. In the morning, she looked for screws or wheels, something that might explain it. There were none. The mirror was too heavy to move on its own. She pushed it back again and left it like that. She didn't sleep well after that. Each day felt slower, heavier. The house creaked more. The shadows seemed longer. The mirror stood quietly, always where it wanted to be. Sometimes when she walked past, she thought she saw something move inside it. Not just her reflection, but something just behind her, like a shadow that didn't belong. One night, she stood in front of the mirror with her arms crossed. She stared into her own eyes for a long time. The reflection stared back. But then something changed. The reflection smiled. Alyssa didn't. She stumbled back, heart pounding, gasping for air. The smile on the reflection faded slowly, like a smirk dissolving into fog. She ran to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and didn't go back into the bedroom until the sun came up. She tried calling a friend, but the signal in town was weak. The few times she reached someone, her voice sounded strange, like someone else was speaking through her. Her friends told her she needed rest. She began locking the bedroom door. But every night it opened by itself. And the mirror always stood facing the bed. On the 10th night, something changed again. She was lying in bed, eyes half closed, the lamp still on. She wasn't sure if she was asleep or awake when she saw the mirror shimmer. Her reflection moved, but she hadn't. Stood up. Her heart stopped. Her real body remained under the blanket. She didn't move. But the reflection did. It stepped closer to the glass, hand pressing against the inside. Then it mouthed two silent words. Help me. Alyssa sat up in bed, sweat pouring from her skin. The reflection was back to normal, sitting in the bed just like her. But those words stayed burned in her mind. Help me. She couldn't look at herself anymore. She covered all the mirrors in the house with sheets. She stayed outside as much as possible, talking to strangers, sitting by the river for hours. But the mirror still called to her. She felt its weight every time she stepped inside the house. It was like a heartbeat in the walls. She started to dream of another girl. A girl with dark hair and pale skin trapped behind glass. In her dreams, the girl was crying, screaming without sound. Alyssa woke up crying too, unsure whose tears they were. Then she started to hear music. Came from upstairs, soft and slow like an old waltz played on a broken record. She would stand at the bottom of the stairs and listen to it. The room upstairs was always dark, the mirror always waiting. One afternoon, she found a photo hidden in the attic. It was old and faded, showing a couple standing by the same mirror. The woman looked like her. Almost exactly. The man looked familiar too. Her hands trembled. She turned the photo over. In faded ink, a name was written. Elena. The air around her turned cold. She looked at the mirror. It showed her standing there, but her hands in the reflection were bloody. She ran downstairs, heart slamming in her chest. She tried to leave the house, but the front door wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. The house had become a trap. That night, the reflection didn't appear at all. Instead, something else did. In the mirror, she saw her own room, but empty. Then, slowly, a figure stepped into view. It wasn't her. It was the girl from the dreams. Elena. Elena pressed her hand against the glass and looked at Alyssa with eyes full of rage and sorrow. Then, behind her, another figure appeared. A man. Alyssa whispered his name before she even realized it. Ethan. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. He reached toward the mirror as if trying to break through. Then Elena turned, screamed silently, and pulled him back into the darkness. The mirror went black. Alyssa fell to her knees. Everything she had tried to bury came rushing back. Ethan hadn't abandoned her. He was taken. And now she understood why the mirror smiled. Why it moved. Why it whispered in the night. It wanted her. And now it had her full attention. Alyssa sat quietly at the edge of her bed, brushing her long brown hair. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional creak of the wooden floor. Outside, the mist clung to the windows like a shroud, blurring the world beyond. The antique mirror stood directly across from her, tall and heavy, its carved wooden frame catching shadows in strange ways. She looked up to meet her reflection, and for a moment everything seemed normal. She blinked. The reflection blinked back. She tilted her head to the side. So did it. But just as she turned to set her brush on the table, something in her vision twitched. She looked back quickly. The reflection was still facing her, head straight, eyes wide open, not tilted at all. She froze. A second passed. Then another. She leaned in closer, heart beginning to race. Her reflection now copied her again, like it should. It was probably nothing. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe she was just jumpy from the move, the isolation, the strange energy of the house. That's what she told herself. That night, she made tea and sat up reading until her eyes burned. But even as she turned the pages, she kept glancing at the mirror. Watching. Days passed, and the unease grew like a slow fog inside her chest. It started small. The mirror image would seem to lag behind her just slightly. If she raised her hand, the reflection followed, half a second too late. If she stood up, sometimes it moved a little too quickly. Just enough to make her question what she saw. She tried to ignore it. She told herself she was imagining things. People see what they expect to see, she thought. Maybe her brain was just playing tricks. But things got worse. One afternoon, Alyssa stood in front of the mirror wearing a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants. She'd just come back from a walk in the woods behind the house. She was tired, hair damp from the fog. But in the mirror, she wasn't wearing the t-shirt. She was wearing a black dress. It was elegant, old-fashioned, with lace at the collar and buttons running down the front. It looked nothing like anything Alyssa owned. She stepped back in shock, her breath catching in her throat. The reflection stared back at her, wearing that same strange black dress, eyes dark and unreadable. Then she blinked, and suddenly the reflection wore the same clothes as her again. The dress was gone. She rubbed her eyes, took a deep breath, and sat down. Maybe she was losing it. Maybe she hadn't slept enough. But when she checked her phone, she saw she'd slept nearly 10 hours the night before. That night, she didn't turn the lights off. She lay in bed with the lamp glowing beside her, eyes fixed on the mirror. For a long time, the reflection stayed still, copied her every move, blinked when she did, looked away when she looked away. But just as she started to drift off, she heard a whisper. Soft. Almost not there. But it came from inside the room. She sat up, heart racing. Her ears strained for another sound, but there was only silence. She turned toward the mirror. The reflection was already sitting upright, staring at her. She hadn't moved yet. She blinked rapidly. The reflection didn't blink at all. Her skin turned cold. She stood up slowly, walked to the mirror, and leaned in close. Her face hovered inches from the glass. Her own expression stared back, blank, stiff, unnatural. Then, slowly, the reflection smiled. Alyssa stepped back, hand over her mouth. She hadn't smiled. She hadn't even moved. Her knees went weak. She backed away from the mirror and turned toward the door, but her reflection didn't move right away. Stayed frozen for a second, smiling. She slept on the couch that night with all the lights on. In the morning, she avoided the bedroom completely. She made coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of what she had seen. She tried calling her sister again, but the line kept dropping. The voice on the other end glitched, breaking into static, then silence. She left a message, though she wasn't sure if it recorded anything at all. Alyssa spent most of the day out of the house. She walked the winding streets of the town, visited the bookstore, tried to lose herself in old novels and quiet shops. The shopkeeper at the antique store gave her a strange look when she mentioned her address. He asked her if she was hearing things yet. She didn't answer. When she returned home that evening, the mirror was waiting. It always was. She gathered the courage to walk up to it again, heart pounding in her ears. Her reflection was there, standing still, wearing the same clothes, copying her movements. But there was something in its eyes, something slightly wrong. They looked just a little too wide, a little too empty. The next time she noticed a difference, it was much worse. She had been painting in the small sunroom downstairs, trying to distract herself. She looked up for just a moment and caught her reflection in the dark screen of the TV nearby. But what she saw made her scream. The reflection had bruises, dark marks along her neck, and red scratches across her cheek. Alyssa touched her own face, panicked, searching for pain. There was none. No marks, no bruises, no scratches. But the image on the TV screen stayed the same, frozen like a photograph of a girl who had suffered something terrible. She ran upstairs and threw a bedsheet over the mirror. Then she shoved a chair in front of it. She didn't want to see herself anymore, or whoever was pretending to be her. She started to question her own mind. Maybe she had gone too long without real company. Maybe grief had finally turned into madness. She searched the internet for symptoms, for answers. Everything pointed to stress, isolation, hallucinations. But deep inside, Alyssa didn't believe she was imagining it. Not when the mirror whispered her name at night. Not when she saw movement behind the sheet that covered it. The final straw came 3 nights later. She was lying awake in the dark, too afraid to sleep. Rain tapped gently against the window and thunder growled far away. Her body was exhausted, but her eyes refused to close. Then, from behind the sheet, she heard a voice. Soft, feminine, and full of fear. It wasn't speaking. It was whispering. Desperate. Alyssa held her breath, trying to catch the words. Then she saw it. The sheet was moving, lifting gently from the top corner. She sat up slowly, not daring to blink. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Corner lifted further, revealing a sliver of the mirror. And in it, her reflection stood still, but the mouth was moving. It was mouthing words. No sound came out. Just movement. Alyssa leaned closer, watching every motion. 2 simple words formed on the reflection's lips. Help me. She stumbled backward, falling off the bed and landing hard on the floor. The sheet fell back into place, covering the mirror again. But the image burned in her mind. Help me. The reflection wasn't her. It never had been. She crawled back into bed, clutching the blanket to her chest, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know who or what was trapped behind the glass. But she knew one thing for certain. Someone was inside the mirror. And they were trying to get out. The days grew colder, and Alyssa found herself trapped inside more often than she liked. The sky always looked gray, and the mist seemed heavier, sticking to the windows like cobwebs. The house creaked louder with each passing day, and no matter how high she turned up the heat, the air remained cold, especially in the bedroom where the mirror stood. She had tried ignoring it. She had kept it covered with a sheet, moved furniture in front of it, even tried not to glance at it as she passed. But somehow the mirror found a way to be noticed. Made sounds, faint ones, whispers, a tapping like fingernails on glass, or a breath that wasn't hers. And sometimes, late at night, the sheet would be pulled slightly to the side, just enough for the glass to peek out and watch her sleep. Alyssa couldn't take it anymore. She needed to know what was happening. The internet didn't help. Searches for haunted mirrors gave her endless stories, but none exactly like hers. She decided to learn more about the house itself. Maybe the key was in its past. She walked to the town's old library, a dusty little building at the edge of the square. It smelled like forgotten memories and faded paper. The librarian was a thin woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Alyssa told her she'd moved into the house on Willow Lane and wanted to know its history. The librarian stiffened. She said very little but showed her to the archive room. It was downstairs, cold and quiet, with shelves full of town records, old newspapers, and family registries. Alyssa began digging. The house had been built over 100 years ago by a family named Whitmore. Several generations lived there, but not for long. Property was known to change hands quickly. Most owners stayed only a year or two. One entry caught her eye. A girl named Elena Whitmore, the last daughter of the family, had disappeared in 1923. No one ever found her. She was 17, beautiful, gifted in music and poetry. She had no siblings, no mother, only a strict father who was a collector of rare objects. It was said Elena had fallen in love with someone her father disapproved of. A boy from town. There were rumors they planned to run away together, but she vanished before that could happen. Her father never spoke of her again. He sealed her room and moved away soon after. The house remained empty for decades. Alyssa found a photo in one of the records, Elena standing next to her father in the very room where the mirror now stood. The mirror looked exactly the same. The same frame, the same height, even the same carvings. It hadn't aged at all. She copied everything she could, took notes, even borrowed a few local history books. That night, she couldn't sleep. The mirror stayed covered, but her thoughts stayed wide awake. Then the dreams began. First, they were soft, almost like memories. She dreamt of walking barefoot through the house wearing a silk dress, her hair pinned up with tiny gold clips. She could feel the chill of the wooden floor, the weight of the mirror's gaze. In the dreams, she wasn't Alyssa. She was someone else. She was Elena. She saw a boy's face. Dark eyes, a quick smile. He kissed her hands, whispered her name. He told her they would leave together. He told her not to be afraid. But the dream always ended the same way, with her standing in front of the mirror, crying, reaching out, and something pulling her in. Alyssa would wake up sweating, her hands cold and her heart racing. The images didn't fade like normal dreams. They clung to her. She could smell the old perfume. She could feel the panic, the love, the betrayal. She tried talking to someone in town, but no one wanted to speak about Elena. The shopkeepers gave her strange looks. One old man in the antique shop finally said, "Some stories are buried for a reason," and turned away. That evening, Alyssa took the sheet off the mirror. She stood in front of it for a long time. The reflection looked like her. Same eyes, same face. But it didn't feel like her. She leaned in, staring deep into her own eyes, hoping to see something, anything, different. And then, for a split second, she did. The girl in the mirror blinked first. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't stress. Alyssa knew in her bones this was real. She decided to look deeper. She found an old box in the attic with letters tied in ribbon. The ink was faded, the paper brittle, but she managed to read them. They were love letters between Elena and a boy named Thomas. The words were sweet and full of hope, but they ended abruptly. The last letter was a warning from Thomas. He wrote, "Your father knows. The mirror is not safe. Don't trust it. If you love me, meet me before the full moon. If you don't come, I'll know he's done something." Alyssa checked the dates. The letter was written 2 days before Elena vanished. The more she read, the more strange details appeared. One note mentioned Elena's father practicing old rituals, trying to preserve what is beautiful. Another spoke of the mirror as if it were alive. "He spends hours with it," Thomas had written. "He says it holds memories. He says it can protect you. But I think it's a prison." Alyssa began to understand. The mirror was not just a mirror. It was something more. A doorway. Cage. Maybe even a soul trap. Each night, the dreams became stronger. She felt herself becoming Elena. She saw the arguments with her father. The threats. The day he locked her in her room. The moment he forced her to stand before the mirror while he chanted words in a language she didn't understand. She remembered screaming. She remembered her hands pressed against the glass. And then darkness. Alyssa woke with scratches on her arms one morning, as if she had been clawing at something in her sleep. Pain was real. The mirror showed faint red lines on her reflection before they appeared on her real skin. She tried to stay awake, but the dreams pulled her under like waves. In one dream, she stood before the mirror with Thomas. He was trying to help her. She could hear his voice clearly. He was saying, "I'll break it. I'll get you out. I swear." But then her father appeared in the reflection. Not behind them, only in the glass. He raised his hand, and Thomas began to fade. Elena screamed. Alyssa screamed. And the mirror shattered. She woke up on the floor, bleeding from her palm where she'd knocked over a glass in her sleep. But the mirror in her room was untouched. The next morning, she found something else in the attic, a journal. It belonged to Elena's father. Most of it was nonsense. Strange symbols, numbers, names in Latin. But one passage stood out. "She will not leave. If I cannot have her in this world, I will keep her in the glass. Let love rot if it must. I will preserve her beauty forever. No death. No time. Only reflection." Alyssa closed the book and stared at the mirror. Now she knew. Elena hadn't vanished. She had been trapped. And somehow Alyssa had become the key. The mirror had chosen her for a reason. The dreams were not memories. They were warnings. Alyssa touched the glass gently. Felt cold, but she felt something else too. A heartbeat, faint and distant. Like the mirror was alive. That night, when she lay in bed, she didn't look away from the mirror. She whispered a name she hadn't said out loud yet. Elena. The reflection blinked. Then it leaned forward. Slowly, carefully, it mouthed one word. Free. Alyssa closed her eyes, and this time she welcomed the dream. The mist never lifted that week. It hung low over the town like a warning, soaking into the bones of the old house and curling beneath the doorways. Alyssa had stopped opening the curtains. Every window showed only fog now, and every room felt smaller, as if the walls were pressing in little by little. The mirror, silent but never still, stayed uncovered. It was too late for bedsheets and denial. Whatever lived in that glass had awakened, and it knew she was watching. She barely slept. Each time she closed her eyes, the dreams pulled her into Elena's world. Each morning she woke up more exhausted, more lost in a story that wasn't hers. But it wasn't just in her head anymore. She felt it in her skin. In the way the shadows moved across the floor even when the light didn't. In the way her reflection would sometimes smile just a second too late. In the way the cold in the bedroom now had teeth. And then there was the feeling that someone was always behind her. First she thought it was paranoia. A trick of nerves stretched too tight. But it never left her. Even in the kitchen. Even outside the house. It was worst in the hallway outside her room, where the mirror stood waiting. She would walk fast past it, feeling the air shift, feeling breath that wasn't hers brush the back of her neck. She never looked over her shoulder. Not anymore. That morning she found a letter. It was in the mailbox, sealed in a plain envelope with no stamp and no return address. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. Typed, not handwritten. One line. She's not you, but she wants to be. Alyssa stared at the words until they blurred. Her hands trembled as she read them again. She didn't know who sent it or how they knew what was happening, but someone did. Someone else understood the mirror. Or Elena. Or both. She thought of burning the letter, but she kept it instead. Tucked it into the drawer beside her bed like a piece of evidence. She stared at her reflection that night for a long time, asking silent questions. But the reflection stayed still. Too still. The next morning, someone knocked on her door. Not the creak of a floorboard. Not a whisper behind the mirror. A real knock. Human. Firm. Her heart jumped. She moved to the door slowly, gripping the handle. No one ever came here. No neighbors visited. No packages were expected. When she opened it, the world tilted. Ethan stood there, soaked in fog and rain, his face pale and thin and haunted. He looked older. His hair longer. His eyes sunken with memories he didn't want to carry. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The man who had vanished without a trace 3 years ago was standing on her porch like no time had passed at all. She didn't know what to say. Neither did he. Then she whispered, "How?" And he said, "I shouldn't be here." She stepped back without realizing, and he followed her inside. They didn't touch at first. Just stood there, strangers with the same ghosts between them. She made tea with trembling hands, trying to fill the silence. He didn't speak again until they sat across from each other in the dim light of the living room. "I saw your name in the rental records," he said finally. "When I was looking for places. I didn't think it could be real. But then I saw the address." "You were dead," she whispered. "I thought you were dead. I thought I was too." She didn't ask where he'd been. Not yet. Instead, she said the word that haunted them both. "The mirror." Finn flinched. He looked at the floor. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not just glass." She nodded. Her throat burned. Her hands felt cold. "I've seen her," she said. Ethan looked up. His eyes were darker than she remembered. Something in them had changed. "Elena," he said. "That's her name." Alyssa froze. He knew. "She's trapped," she said softly. "I know." "How?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a photograph. He handed it to her with shaking fingers. It was a picture of the mirror, taken from an angle she didn't recognize. In the reflection, a girl stood in a long black dress, her face twisted in pain. Alyssa had never seen the girl before, but she knew exactly who it was. "She found me," Ethan said. "After I left. I was in this old town far north. I was lost, honestly. Drinking too much, moving around. Then one night I stayed in this motel, and the mirror in the room, she was in it." "Elena?" Alyssa asked. "She looked like you at first. But it wasn't you. I thought I was dreaming. I left. But she kept appearing. In every mirror I looked into. She followed me." He leaned back, ran a hand through his damp hair. "She spoke to me. Not with sound. Just her mouth moving. And I started to remember things. Dreams. Images. Like they were mine, but they weren't. I started looking for answers. Found stories about your house. Found your name. And I came." Their eyes locked. The silence between them buzzed with unfinished emotions. All the pain of his disappearance, all the questions she never asked. Now he was here. And everything was even more confusing. That night, they sat together on the couch. She leaned into him slowly, unsure if the comfort was real or just something they both desperately needed. His arms were warm, but his body trembled. He kissed her forehead. She kissed him back. Felt real. But it felt wrong, too. "Why did you leave me, Ethan?" she asked finally, her voice almost breaking. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" Closed his eyes. His jaw clenched. "Because I saw her before I left," he said. "In a mirror at your old place. I didn't tell you because I thought I was losing my mind. And then I disappeared because I followed her. I followed the dreams. I thought maybe if I found out what she wanted, I could come back. I could fix it. I could fix us." Alyssa didn't speak. Her tears came quietly. He held her tighter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. They didn't sleep that night. They lay together in silence, both staring at the mirror in the bedroom. It was uncovered. It always was now. The reflection showed them both lying still. But after a while, Alyssa noticed something strange. The reflection of Ethan looked clearer, brighter, more real than the one beside her. And then the reflection turned its head toward her. But the real Ethan didn't move. Her breath caught. She blinked. And the mirror returned to normal. In the early morning, Ethan left the bed to make coffee. Alyssa stayed behind, staring at her reflection. Her own face looked tired, pale. But something else stared back from behind her eyes. Something that didn't belong. "She's not you. But she wants to be." The letter echoed in her mind. She stood up and walked slowly to the mirror. Placed her hand against the glass. And the girl on the other side did the same. But it didn't feel like a reflection anymore. Felt like someone waiting. Watching. Learning. Alyssa sat by the fire, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring into the flames that barely warmed the room. Ethan stood near the window, looking out into the thick mist that had refused to lift since his arrival. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence between them was full, like a breath held too long. Finally, she turned to him. Her voice was soft, almost afraid. "You knew her?" He didn't answer right away. His shoulders tensed. Then he nodded once, slowly. "I didn't just know her," he said. "I loved her." Alyssa felt something sharp twist in her chest. She looked down at her hands, bruised and thin and shaking. It wasn't jealousy. It was fear. 'Cause deep down she had suspected it. The way Elena's face had sometimes looked like hers, but not quite. The way the reflection in the mirror had seemed to know Ethan, long before she ever met him. She was everything, Ethan continued, his voice heavy. Charming, brilliant, beautiful. But she was different. Obsessed with strange things. She believed she could escape death. She thought the mirror was more than just glass. She thought it was a gate. Alyssa's voice trembled. You said you left because you saw her. But you never told me this. I couldn't. I didn't know how to explain. When we met, I was trying to forget her. Trying to build something real. With you. He turned toward her. But Elena never left me. Not really. She was always there. In the background. And then she started showing up in the mirrors. First, I thought it was guilt. A trick of the mind. But it wasn't. Alyssa's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to cry. She stared at him, waiting. She made a deal, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. A ritual. A binding. She believed if she could anchor her soul into the mirror, she could live forever. Not as a ghost, but as flesh. She just needed a way back. Alyssa stood slowly. Her knees felt weak. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear his next words. She needs a body, Alyssa. A host. She chose me, Alyssa whispered. He nodded. She's been preparing you. The bruises. The dreams. The feelings. She's been softening the barrier between you and her. Bit by bit, she's replacing you. Alyssa stumbled back a step. Her hand flew to her neck, where a bruise had recently appeared without explanation. Then to her arms, where faint finger marks had shown up overnight. The memories, the pain, the strange calm that sometimes washed over her like it wasn't her own. Everything made sense now. Everything pointed to Elena. I've seen myself in the mirror, she said. Smiling when I'm not. Wearing things I never wore. And once I saw her bleeding. But I wasn't hurt. She's testing control, Ethan said. The more she gets, the stronger her grip becomes. The moment she fully possesses you, you won't know the difference anymore. Alyssa sank onto the couch, her legs no longer able to hold her. Her breath came in short gasps. But why me? She asked. Why not someone else? She chose you because of me, Ethan said, sitting beside her. She saw my feelings for you. She knew the connection would make it easier. She's been feeding off that bond. Twisting it. Alyssa turned her face away. She felt sick. Betrayed. Used. Every kiss, every moment she thought was hers. Had Elena been watching all along? Had she been there, learning her voice, her mannerisms, her thoughts? Can she be stopped? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. There's a way, Ethan said. But it's dangerous. The mirror must be broken while she's fully inside it. Not half in, not whispering, not watching, fully present. That's the only way to sever the tie. Alyssa looked up, her voice hollow. And what happens to me? If she's already taken too much, he said slowly, you may not survive the break. Alyssa stared into the fire again. The flickering light danced across the walls, but none of it reached her. Everything inside her felt dim. She had spent so long trying to heal, to start over. And now her life wasn't even hers anymore. Why didn't you stop her before? She asked, barely able to keep the anger out of her voice. I was a fool, Ethan said. I thought I could control it. I thought I could save her. But by the time I realized what she truly was, it was too late. I ran. He reached out and took Alyssa's hand. I won't run again. She pulled her hand away gently, unsure if she could trust anything now. Her own reflection didn't belong to her. Her body, her mind, she wasn't sure how much of it was left. That night, she stood alone in front of the mirror. The glass looked still, calm. Her reflection mirrored her exactly. No delays, no strange smiles. But when she moved her hand, the girl in the mirror hesitated. And then smiled. Not kindly, not sweetly. A knowing smile. Cold, triumphant. Alyssa didn't flinch. She stared back. "You want me," she whispered. "But I'm still here." The reflection tilted its head, then opened its mouth. No sound came out, but Alyssa read the words clearly. Not for long. She stepped back, trembling, and turned out the lights. The mirror glowed faintly in the darkness, like something alive under the surface. That night, the dreams changed. She wasn't Elena anymore. She was herself, locked in a glass prison. On the other side, she saw herself walking through the house, smiling, touching things she never touched, moving like she didn't belong in that skin. It wasn't her. It was Elena. And she had already crossed halfway. Alyssa woke up screaming. Ethan rushed in, holding her close, whispering that it was just a dream. But she knew better. It wasn't a dream. It was a warning. A countdown. She had to end this. Before she forgot who she was. They started making plans. Ethan said they needed a binding circle, salt, mirrors covered. But none of it mattered unless Elena was inside the glass completely. That was the risk. And Alyssa could feel time running out. Her thoughts weren't hers sometimes. She would speak without meaning to. She'd find herself standing in places she didn't remember walking to. Once she looked down and saw her hand bleeding and didn't feel a thing. The line was thinning. One evening, while Ethan gathered supplies, she went upstairs alone. She needed to see the mirror again. She needed to face what waited inside. She stood before it, staring. The girl inside looked like her. But she knew it wasn't. Alyssa pressed her palm to the glass. "I won't let you win," she whispered. The reflection smiled sweetly, then leaned forward, eyes dark and deep and full of ancient hunger. "You already have." Alyssa staggered back, her heart pounding. But she didn't run. She knew now. The mirror wasn't just a prison. It was a test. A battle of will. And the longer she looked into it, the more she saw something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of Elena. She was afraid of losing herself to her. And that was exactly what Elena wanted. The storm came fast. Thick black clouds rolled in over the town like a heavy blanket, pressing down on the rooftops and filling the air with electricity. Thunder growled in the distance, low and angry. Inside the old Victorian house, the walls shook with the first strike of lightning. Alyssa stood by the mirror, her fingers trembling, the candlelight flickering against her face. She could feel it, the pull, the decision pressing in on all sides. Ethan was in the hallway, setting salt around the doors and windows, muttering old words from the pages of a worn book. He moved like a man preparing for battle, but there was something broken in his eyes. He knew what was coming. And he knew it might end him. Alyssa didn't call to him. She stood alone, staring into the glass, waiting for Elena to appear. Her reflection looked normal again, but that meant nothing. Calm before the storm had always been her trick. She felt it before she saw it. The change in the air. Cold crawling up her arms. And then the mirror shimmered like water. The glass rippled. The figure inside blinked once, then smiled. Elena. She stepped forward slowly, as if walking through fog, though her body never left the mirror. Her face was clearer now. Not a perfect copy of Alyssa, but close enough to confuse the world. Her eyes, however, were ancient. Eyes that had seen death and wanted more. Alyssa spoke first. "I know what you are." Elena smiled. "You know what I've shown you. You used him. You used me. You don't love anyone." "I loved him once," Elena said softly. But he was weak. He ran from me. Just like he'll run from you when he sees what you're becoming. I'm not becoming you. Oh, but you are, Elena whispered. Piece by piece. Look at your hands. Look at your thoughts. You've already let me in. All I ask now is one thing, let me live. Alyssa stepped closer. Her voice didn't shake. Why me? Because your heart still believes in him. You were perfect. Soft. Easy to mold. You don't want power. You want love. That makes you vulnerable. A flash of lightning lit the room, throwing shadows everywhere. Candle blew out. The mirror glowed faintly on its own now. I'll stop you, Alyssa said. You can try. But if you break this mirror, you break the soul inside it. Mine and his. Alyssa froze. What are you talking about? Elena smiled wider now, cruel and calm. Did you think he came back whole? Finn died the night he ran from me. What you have now is only a shadow. A tether. I hold the rest. You destroy me, you destroy him. Alyssa couldn't breathe. You're lying. No, Elena said. I'm offering you a trade. Lightning struck again, and this time the windows cracked from the pressure. The house groaned. The salt on the floor began to smoke. Let me cross over, Elena said. Let me live again. Let me have your body. In return, I give you Ethan, whole, alive, real. You'll never be alone again. Alyssa's heart pounded. The floor felt like it was tilting. She stepped back, bumping into the dresser, gripping it for support. Her mind raced. Could it be true? Ethan came running into the room, the book in one hand, his face pale. She's in, he said. The circle's breaking. We have to do this now. Alyssa turned to him, the mirror behind her. She says if we destroy the mirror, we destroy you too. He hesitated. Just for a second. That second was everything. Alyssa's breath caught. It's true, she whispered. You didn't tell me. Ethan looked down. I didn't want you to have to choose. Thunder roared overhead. The lights flickered. The mirror began to crack, hairline fractures crawling across the surface like veins. Elena's face twisted slightly in panic, then turned smooth again. Choose, she said. Live with him. Or lose him forever. Alyssa shook her head, her voice barely there. You don't get to offer love as a bargain. You'd rather die alone? I'd rather die myself. Elena screamed. The sound didn't come through the air, it came inside Alyssa's head, high and sharp and cold. The mirror flashed. Every mirror in the house shook violently, spiderwebbing with cracks. Finn grabbed Alyssa's arm. We have to do it. She's too strong. You have to make the call. Alyssa looked into the mirror one last time. She saw herself, tired, bruised, afraid. She saw Ethan behind her, half a shadow, half a man. And she saw Elena, hungry, beautiful, eternal. Her hands clenched. She picked up the iron candlestick from the floor. Elena's eyes widened. Wait, the mirror voice said. I waited too long already, Alyssa whispered. She raised the candlestick high and smashed it into the mirror. The sound was deafening. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. Light burst from the frame like fire, filling the room with blinding brightness. Screams filled the air, Elena's voice twisting into something inhuman. The wind howled through the house, slamming doors open, knocking pictures off the walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Alyssa covered her ears, screaming too as pain shot through her head like lightning. She fell to her knees. Ethan dropped beside her, pulling her close, trying to shield her from the storm of glass and spirit. Then silence. When the light faded, the mirror was gone. Not broken. Gone. The frame sat empty on the wall. The house stilled. The mist outside began to thin, the storm drifting into soft rain. Alyssa opened her eyes. Her body ached. Her head throbbed. But something else felt different. She was still here. She was still herself. Ethan knelt beside her, but his face looked different. Paler. Distant. "Ethan," she said. He smiled softly. "You did it." She reached for him, but her hand passed through. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you," he said gently. "Only a part of me was real. Part you gave life to. The rest was hers." Alyssa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You said you wouldn't leave me again." He touched her face, his hand like wind, barely there. "I didn't want to. But you chose right. You saved yourself. That's love, Alyssa. Not giving up who you are for someone else." She sobbed, clinging to the air where he used to be. "I love you," she whispered. "I know." Then he was gone. The house was quiet. The storm was over. Alyssa sat in the broken room, the candle burned out, the mirror vanished. She was alone. But she was free. And in that silence, something inside her stirred, not Elena's presence but her own strength rising from the ruins. The wind outside had settled into a quiet hum, like the house was finally breathing again. The heavy mist that had surrounded the town for weeks was gone, pulled back like a curtain revealing a world that Alyssa no longer trusted. Birds were chirping faintly somewhere beyond the trees, and the smell of rain still lingered in the air. Everything should have felt calm now. Safe. But Alyssa stood in the middle of the bedroom, surrounded by broken glass, feeling like a stranger in her own life. The mirror was gone. Not just shattered, but completely erased, like it had never existed. The frame hung on the wall, empty and hollow, its once glittering surface now a dark void. She stared into it, half expecting something to return, to twitch behind the absence, but there was nothing. Ethan was in the kitchen, making tea. He moved quietly, almost mechanically, and he hadn't said much since the storm. He had come back to her, or maybe a version of him had, but Alyssa wasn't sure if what had returned was truly whole. Sometimes he smiled the way she remembered. Sometimes he touched her cheek with that same warmth. But other times he would pause in the middle of a sentence like he'd forgotten where he was. Or worse, like he was listening to something only he could hear. She tried not to notice those moments, but they came more often now. That morning, she had watched him stare out the window for nearly 20 minutes, his tea growing cold in his hands. When she asked what he was thinking, he said, "Nothing," and smiled like it was true. But then he whispered something when he turned away. A name. Elena. Alyssa had frozen in place. The sound of that name, even now, made her skin tighten. She hadn't confronted him about it. Not yet. Part of her wanted to believe it was just memory, just the residue of a haunting. Through all, she had destroyed the mirror. She had made the choice. She had won. But the truth was, she didn't feel like a winner. Later that night, as she was brushing her hair in front of the hallway mirror, the only one she hadn't covered, she caught herself pausing. Not because of something she saw, but because of what she didn't. For just a second, she thought her reflection had smirked. Not smiled. Smirked. A curl of the lips that didn't belong to her. Not in that moment. Not in any moment. It was there and gone in a flash, like a trick of the light, but it was enough to make her heart stutter. She leaned in, staring hard. The woman in the glass stared back. Same eyes. Same mouth. Same everything. But was it? She backed away slowly and turned off the light. The darkness wrapped around her like a cold hand. She went to bed without telling Ethan. The next day, she tried to ignore the feeling. She cleaned the living room, placed broken picture frames, removed the salt lines from the floor, and vacuumed up the ash from the burned herbs. She opened the windows. She let sunlight in. The house felt lighter, less haunted. But that didn't mean she was. Ethan helped. He cooked dinner. He told her about a book he'd once read on parallel souls. He even laughed once the way he used to. But then, after dinner, as they sat on the porch watching the sun go down, he suddenly leaned forward, gripping his head like something had pierced his brain. Alyssa dropped her mug and rushed to him. "Are you okay?" He looked up at her with wide eyes. Not afraid. Empty. Then he said it again. "Elena." She froze. "Why do you keep saying her name?" "I didn't say anything." "You did. Just now." "I don't remember." He looked confused. Sad. Like a man waking from a dream he didn't choose. Alyssa sat back, her hands shaking. "You're not all the way back, are you?" Ethan looked at her for a long time. The wind played with his hair and the last bit of sun warmed his face. He looked like himself. Sounded like himself. But his silence said everything. "I think a part of her stayed," he said quietly. Alyssa stood up and walked inside, afraid of what she might say next. That night she dreamed again. Not of Elena, but of herself. She was standing in the same house, wearing the same clothes. Everything looked normal. But the feeling was wrong. The light was too bright. The silence too deep. She walked through the hallway, past the empty frame on the wall. When she turned into the bedroom, she saw herself sleeping in the bed, curled up next to Ethan. She stared. The sleeping version of her looked peaceful. Real. Then the version of her in the dream smiled. And whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." Alyssa woke with a scream, drenched in sweat. Ethan held her, asking what was wrong, but she couldn't speak. Her heart was pounding. Her body felt cold. She checked the mirrors that morning. All of them. No sign of Elena. No sign of anything. Except her own reflection. But it didn't help. She started writing down everything she saw, every strange moment. Every whisper. Every smirk. She didn't want to forget. She didn't want to be tricked again. One day she found Ethan in the attic, going through old boxes. He looked up at her and smiled, but she noticed he was holding something behind his back. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Show me." He hesitated, then handed it over. It was a shard of mirror. From the original one. The one that should have been destroyed. "Where did you get this?" "It was under the floorboards. I didn't want to throw it away. I don't know why." Alyssa felt like the air had been knocked out of her. "You kept it?" "I didn't mean to. I found it and She turned and walked away before he could finish. That night she held the shard in her hands, alone in the bedroom. It was small, no bigger than her palm. But when she tilted it toward the candlelight, she saw it again. The smirk. Quick. Gone. But it was there. She put the shard in a metal box, locked it, and buried it deep in the garden. Ethan didn't ask about it again. Weeks passed. The house settled. The fog never returned. Ethan started to sleep through the night again. Sometimes he even laughed without hesitation. They went for walks. Talked about leaving the town. Starting over. Somewhere sunny. Somewhere without mirrors. But even in the best moments, Alyssa felt something just behind her. Not fear. Not a voice. Just a presence. Once, while brushing her hair, she looked into the bathroom mirror and tried something. She frowned. Her reflection frowned. She smiled. Her reflection smiled. Then, very slowly, she turned her head to the side. And out of the corner of her eye, just before she looked away, her reflection didn't move quite as fast. That night, she put black cloth over every mirror in the house, including the empty frame in the hallway. She never removed them again. Some things, she decided, weren't meant to be fully understood. Some choices never stopped echoing. And sometimes survival came with a price. Alyssa lived. Ethan stayed. But the reflection? The reflection never really left.